John David doesn't remember anything about his biological parents. He came to live with Kay and Gilbert Hine as a baby. His origin story within the Hine family, as documented only through family gossip and rumor, went something like this. The Hines had already adopted one son, Gilbert's namesake, when John David came into their lives, but that wasn't his name at the time, and he wasn't handed over freely. All or part of the story could be true because, unfortunately, we only know what Gilbert's brother and sister-in-law, Ward and Volney Hine, passed along to Kay's kids years after she went missing. They said that John David's biological parents were sharecroppers, maybe from Texas. They had other children who all accompanied them in the groves as they picked the fruit that they would be paid a meager wage for. John, as an infant, was too young to be out in the grove while they worked. Now, it's hard to even say what month or even year this occurred because, first, John isn't even sure that the date on his birth certificate, 1961, is his real birthday. I was told that he was around 6 months old when he was given to Kay to watch. Narrowing it down by month isn't possible because oranges are harvested during many months of the year in Florida, although October to June seems to be when they are most plentiful. While a landowner in 1972 might be fine and dandy with kids old enough to help pick, and kids often were sent out there to pick oranges, a baby would probably get in the way and even distract its mother from the task at hand. Remember, these people working the groves were, to the landowner, just another set of hands pulling profit for him straight out of the trees. Having to stop to feed or change a baby a few times a day would keep that mother from doing her job. So somehow, and it's unknown how, this family got Kay's name and she agreed to watch the child for them. What story she was told and what was exactly agreed upon is unclear. I will note that the Hines also owned local citrus groves, so it's possible that this was one of their groves being worked, but there was also groves down on the Rutland Ranch, so it's not even clear in which of the local groves this family was working. Whatever the case, as the story goes, when the family came to retrieve their child, Gilbert Hine ordered them off his property and told them they weren't getting the baby back, and if he gave them any trouble, he would see to it that they lost their other children. I suppose this might hold some weight coming from someone who would go on to supervise the juvenile court division in Manatee County, but that would mean that John David's biological parents knew that, and knew where he worked. And that fact might suggest that they weren't sharecroppers from Texas at all, but perhaps even locals who knew what Gilbert Hine was capable of. How old were you when you came to live with Kay and Gilbert Hine?
I was a baby. They supposedly, they adopted Charlie, my brother.
Uh-huh.
He named him after himself. And I was picked by Kay Hine, my mother. So it was kind of like I was her kid and he was his kid. But the only difference is that he had adoption papers and I never did. I didn't have a birth certificate until 1982 when they made up one. His new wife is on the birth certificate saying that she's my mother.
Oh, wow.
That's the only time I ever had a birth certificate until 1982. Because I wasn't ever, I wasn't a foster kid. We had foster kids there eventually, but I was supposedly her son and he was his son, and he was very abusive to me and my mother for forever.
You and your brother came before all the foster kids? Is that what you're saying? You two as babies were there and then they started getting foster kids?
Yes.
And you're not sure how he came to be with them? They just wanted to adopt a child, and so they got this child. It was a legal adoption as opposed to yours was not.
Right. Mine, there was no adoption.
Did you ever find your birth parents?
No. I was told by the sisters, they were older, they told me years later that my parents had come back out there to pick me up because Gilbert Hine was, he worked in the juvenile court system. So I believe that that the parents might have been under suspicion of something at one point, and they took me away from them. But then when they came back to get me, said that they came out to the house out there, and sisters say that he walked off we had orange groves back then, and walked off into the orange groves with the two of them, and that's the last she heard of them. So she doesn't know if they left, if they ended up in the same fate as her. I don't know if they figured it out or what had happened but he was in with the juvenile court system.
Right. Now,
all I can think of is that maybe he talked them into letting me stay with him until that was worked out. And then when it was worked out, he refused to give me up.
Right. What the story that she had told me that I think she said again when one of his brother's wives or something told her was that there was a group of people that would come and work in the orange groves from Texas every year, and they were not able to. They had other children with them. You would have been your siblings, and the owner of the grove would not allow a baby on the property while I guess they were picking oranges, which is understandable. And so someone gave them Kay's name, and she ended up watching you for some length of time. I don't know if it was overnight or it was just the days or whatever, but at some point they came back to get you, and they would not give you up. He basically told them, get out of here, or I'm going to get your other kids taken away. Is that any of that accurate or to your knowledge true?
I would have no idea. The only thing I know is that they said that the parents came to, what you just said was, more to it than what I had heard, that there was about the orange groves and that, but those were our orange groves. Gilbert Hine and Clyde Hine and Ward Hine, the brothers,
Mm-hmm.
They owned the orange groves that the people would come and pick. But in my time, when anyone would go out and pick, they were all Hispanic.
So they stole you. They stole you from your parents is what they did.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because there was no birth certificate. There was no adoption papers. They just basically, and when I would go to school, and the teacher, they would ask for, a birth certificate or identification, and that he had a little card that he had from the Sarasota hospital, where you can clearly see where someone had taken an eraser and scratched out a name, and he put my name on there with a birth date. So I don't even know. My birthday's probably not even right.
Did you ever even find out what your birth name was?
No, they refused to tell me anything, or he would refuse to tell me anything. My mother she was pretty much she was pretty much like me, just basically like a slave there. We worked, and he's very abusive, alcoholic. He was very good to Charlie, my brother.
Mm-hmm.
He never treated him bad, and even on the day of the disappearance, because my mom and I had planned that she had the car loaded up, the trunk, and that we were loaded up to leave us on a Saturday, and that obviously didn't happen. So he must have found out, and that was it.
What was your impression of them as a couple, your mom and Gilbert? How did they get along at all? Or
no, they didn't get along at all, because she had a whole separate bedroom, and she was always bruised up, and he was just very violent man.
Physically.
Violent to me and her.
Wow.
She would try to protect me, and of course it'd be worse. It'd be more for her, and he'd be more violent to her.
What about the foster children? How were they treated?
Well, they were treated just basically like slave labor. They were there, and they were just used to work on the ranch, farm. We had a lot of animals and that, and so they just basically worked. He had them as workers. That's what he'd always say. He says, I didn't want kids, I wanted workers.
Was the foster situation his idea or Kay's?
Oh, I'm sure it was probably his idea. She had no say-so in anything. Her and I just, we'd stay away from him as much as we could and take care of the animals and such. And he'd go to work and come home and get drunk and get mean. And
jeez. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the scary thing is that he's working for the juvenile court system. And
Exactly.
I did a lot of reading on that system, and it's clear to me that they were sort of in with the local judge, this Judge Ricky, who wanted to sort of control countywide the foster system, but the state was moving in to take over, and I think that's when the end came for them being foster, because even in articles, your mom was saying that the state was coming in and wanting to impose rules and things, and they wanted she was trying to get private funding for it. He must have just had her out there like a mouthpiece trying to do PR in the public to keep, because I thought maybe there was a financial reason why he was wanting to do it. They're getting not a lot, but a certain amount of money for each kid. And at one point she was registered for 8 and she was in the newspaper saying they wanted to get 20. And I'm thinking 20 kids just for this one woman taking care of them. That's crazy. So your perspective is totally different. I guess for some reason I thought maybe because she didn't really have full custody of her other children when she left her previous husband. Maybe she felt guilty about that, and maybe that's why she wanted more children. So I just couldn't understand the dynamic. So it seems like it was him that you're thinking wanted the whole foster care situation, and he wanted them for labor on his ranch.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah, he got paid. Yeah, they paid him for labor, basically.
Right. Okay, so tell me what you remember from the day that she went missing. Were you home that day? It was a Saturday, did you say?
Yeah, it was a Saturday. We were going to leave that day because that day she was going to go to the fair. She had the judging at the fair, and we were going to leave and told him that we were going to the fair. She said that we were, that was the deal. But, I woke up that morning, and so that never happened. She was no longer there, and, no fair. All that was not happening.
So you woke up, she was already gone.
Yeah, but I don't know. It was a long time ago. I think it was a lot of, I can't remember exactly.
No, that's okay. I understand. Yeah.
I just remember that we were going to leave, and, I don't know when exactly she disappeared, but shortly after that, I think he told me and my Charlie he took shotgun out and put it by the front door. And he says if anybody, even the police, show up on the property to shoot them, Well, we were just kids, and it was ridiculous. What are you talking about?
Right.
Why would you want us to shoot?
How old were you at this time when she went missing?
11.
11. Wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember the last time you saw her?
That night.
The night before.
Yeah.
Were you supposed to go to the fair with her?
Well, that's what she said we were going to do. Well, tell him that we were going to do. Yeah, we were going to go to the fair. She was due to judge. I think it was a poultry, because we had a lot of chickens and that, and she was really newer, poultry, newer animals. So we were going to take off from that point. I don't know if we were actually going to go to the fair or we were just going to take off.
And she was going to take both of you and Charlie?
No.
Just
no,
you?
Charlie has always been
Daddy's boy.
He's always been his son, and he would do anything for him because he always did anything for him. As long as he never got beat, he never got mistreated. He treated him like gold. So even to this day, he keeps, he would talk about him as though he were such a wonderful person, because he was to him. It just wasn't for us.
Oh, so his impression of Gilbert is totally different than what everybody else basically is, with everybody.
Yeah, he parrots everything he says, that she was seeing somebody and ran off with them, things like that. He he knows good and well that she'd never been seeing anybody. She was always there when we came home from school. She was always there.
Right.
She was never alone. She was always there. He would go off and do things, but she wasn't allowed to.
Wow.
But he was always right there defending him and saying that he's right, when anybody can see if you look at the story, even if you want to believe him. It's impossible. She didn't just leave.
Doesn't make sense at all. So tell me, do you remember in the newspaper, Betty Jane or Deborah, I guess, mentioned that she got a call that day? Did she tell you about that? Call from her mom?
No, I heard about that later, I think, from them.
Okay.
That she called them and she was in distress.
All right. And do you so you don't remember her showing up that day to the ranch to look for her mother?
I was told to stay in the room and not even look out the window and that. He never said what it was. It was almost like Santa Claus was coming, and you're not supposed to go. So, yeah, I missed out on everything because I was told not to. So I had no idea. Well, I didn't know any of this.
And were there any foster kids at that point on the property, or were they done doing that by then?
I think it was done at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember the other ones being there at that time.
And do you remember seeing or hearing any signs of violence in the home that day?
No, I don't remember. I saw signs of violence.
What did
Things were knocked over, chairs were knocked over, and all of her things were there. Not the things that were in the trunk, her clothes and stuff that were, but her glasses. The only thing that was missing that was normally there was her pistol. She kept it's either, I think, nickel plated or it was chrome. It's very shiny, 38. She kept in a holster in the windowsill in her bedroom, and her holster was laying in the middle of the living room floor for some odd reason. The gun was gone, the holster was there, and some chairs were knocked over. So I still have never found that pistol.
Oh, so you never saw the pistol after that day?
Right. She always kept it in that window.
So
I'm wondering if she tried to defend herself that morning and it got used against her or something.
Well, it sounds like there was some sort of scuffle that occurred.
There was a scuffle. I didn't know if it was that night or that morning before I woke up. It was a Saturday, so I didn't have to get up early. That's my only time I didn't have to get up early on a Saturday, so this things must have happened before.
Yeah. If there was a gunshot, do you think you would have woken up or maybe not?
I would think I would. I would assume I would. But, it's all the way at the other end of the house is where they sleep and where they're at.
Oh, okay. So
my bedroom was at the very other end of the house.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms on the other end of the house, and I was like near the end of that end of the house, and they had their end of the house, and they kept it kind of closed off because they had an air conditioning unit on their end of the house where they could stay cool, and on my end I didn't have any air conditioner or anything. I just had a fan in a window on mine, and it's right there over my bed, so it's kind of loud. So I don't know. I probably couldn't have heard it.
Yeah.
It did happen.
Did you ever see anything odd out at the property? Any signs where he could have done anything to her, burn, bury, anything like that?
Well, we have too much property out there. I mean, there's a lot of property. We have property that's separated, a lot of property that's separated from the property that we were at. We were on a 15-acre of property, and right across the street was a lot of acreage of his brother, Clyde Hine, and him own, and a swamp back there. They have a swamp area. And down at the river, which is now Rye Wilderness, that was donated to the county, and the Sheriff Youth Ranch is back there, and I guess that was a portion of that with the old graveyard, and that's was donated to the Sheriff's Youth Ranch from him. And there's an old graveyard there. I mean, she could be in that graveyard. She could be, there's too many places. That's the problem. I mean, if you wanted to look, where would you look? He has multiple properties.
And were all the properties touching? Were they all like attached?
No.
No. So they were around. Wow.
Yeah, one is 15 acres, and yet across the street it's a lot more than that. And then a couple miles down the road were the river, where the old graveyard and the old homestead and that. a lot of property there, and Old Cemetery Road, which is now I think 136th Terrace East. I think it's in off 675. There are 5 rental homes there, right beside a cemetery. So there's another cemetery there. So we had 2 cemeteries. We had 2 old houses, 2 homes that were beside ours out there that both had septic tanks. And I talked to a deputy sheriff at one point, and he thought that there was a good possibility that if she were put in one of those septic tanks, the chemicals in the septic tank would pretty much make everything disappear.
Huh, I didn't know that septic tanks had chemicals in them. But they never searched it? Or the 2?
I don't know if they ever did, because they didn't do it back then that I know of. If they did it after that time, I don't know. I wasn't living out there.
So I Googled this question right after I re-listened to this audio as I prepared this podcast to air. Listeners, will you allow me a digression for a moment? Have you noted the ease with which we have integrated the word Google into our language? It is now a noun and a verb. Google is a place you go for information, and it's a word used to suggest the corresponding action in question. It's amazing to me that we live in an age where many of us carry around a supercomputer that's basically the size of a 3x5 card, and we have access to so much information in the literal palm of our hands. Anyway, I quite literally Googled, do you put chemicals in septic tanks, and this is what I learned. Septic systems do not need any additives to function properly and treat wastewater. A public health and social services page read, quote, "Do not put strong chemicals such as cleaning products down the drain. Household chemicals such as drain cleaners, paint thinners, and floor cleaners can destroy important bacteria in your septic tank and contaminate ground and surface water." Now, I have lived in at least 3 homes that had septic tanks in my life, and in none of them did we add chemicals. In fact, other than having them pumped out every 5 years or so, we didn't give our septic system any thought at all, until the toilet stopped flushing properly, which is generally when you know it's time to call out that humble servant of the Lord that gets paid hourly to literally suck that shit out. So maybe what the law enforcement officer meant when he spoke with John David is that the presumption would have been that a body left in the conditions of a septic tank for a couple decades might not be conducive to a probative search. I'm not sure I agree about that. Another quick Google search brought up a case in Worcestershire, England, where police found the remains of a woman who had been missing since 1982 in her septic tank. They promptly arrested her 86-year-old husband, a farmer, who had told everyone at the time that he had no idea what happened to his wife. Does that sound familiar? Bless the justice system in that case for not being ableist, because he was 89 years young as he was tried in front of a jury of his peers, who then learned he had also tried to blame a serial killer for his missing wife. Turns out, police and everyone else had all walked around where she was buried, but never bothered to check the septic tank. Again, does that sound familiar? I found multiple cases where bodies had been located in septic tanks for a decade or so, and later found. So, it said, I think 5 days afterward, she was reported missing, and not even by him. And then, of course, he tells the police that she just ran off, and she was always out. She went out all the time, and she was staying out all night, which was clearly a lie.
And the likelihood of her taking off, or even with other guys, didn't make any sense, because she had a condition where she couldn't grow hair on her head,
right?
And she had this apparatus over her bed that she had to get into periodically, because it was like a winch type of thing, because she had a degenerative back problem that she had to get in there and had to kind of stretch her back and that so that she could get out of pain.
I mean, her glasses and medicine were still left, so she didn't just leave. That's just stupid,
No, nothing, and she wasn't running around with anybody. Yeah,
No.
No.
Do you remember what his demeanor was after she went missing? Was it any different than normal?
Well, yeah, he was very agitated. He was very angry. that's why I say he said he took a shotgun out of the gun case and loaded it and sat it by the front door. And he says, if anybody comes, even if the police come, he says, shoot them on sight. Don't even talk to them. That's when you knew something was wrong.
So after this happened, you still lived with him?
Yeah, I still had to live with him, but I moved pretty much. I stayed away from him. So I would come in from school before he'd get off of work, and so I would pretty much just, get off the property, run down to the river. I'd swim in the river. I'd spend as much time as I could away from him. Pretty much had to raise myself from then on until I could get old enough to get out of there.
And was that right after high school?
Yeah, as soon as I could. In high school, I joined the military and got out. Jeez. But of course, getting into the military was another thing because I didn't have a birth certificate.
Yeah, how did that happen?
I had to convince them that, well, obviously I have one, because I got my high school diploma and that, so I must have had it. And I told them, that I'll just send it to them later, once I'm in. And the recruiter is, he wants to recruit. So, I got in, and once I got in, it was pretty much forgotten about.
Did your mom ever, well, she wouldn't have mentioned that to you. There was some talk about possibly Gilbert sexually abusing children, and I wondered if you ever heard any whispers of that.
I know he was very strange because I wasn't, the foster kids and I weren't allowed to have doors on our rooms. Charlie had a door on his room, of course, but, we didn't have doors. So many times in the middle of the night, I would, I'd like wake up and, it's dark, but I would look over and he'd be standing in the doorway, just standing there. And I don't know if making sure that I'm asleep or what, but, we did have one girl that was a foster girl back there. So, he never abused me that way, but he was just very violent and angry.
Mm-hmm. So there was only one girl that you recall of that wasn't a baby, that was ever a foster child?
Yes.
The rest were boys?
I remember her name was Barbara, but I can't remember her last name. Because we're just kids, we call each other by our name,
Mm-hmm. And this wasn't, it said that it was the first non-segregated foster home. So you had black and white children?
No, we never had any black kids there.
You're kidding me.
I think we had a couple Hispanic, if they're going to call that, segregated or not segregated.
See, there were.
I remember black children.
Wow.
He was very racist. I mean, I can't imagine that at all. But, if they're being used as a slave, I guess it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, the thing is, they were lying in these newspaper articles. I mean, from how the story that she told. And I'm sure he was making her tell these stories because, first of all, they have an illegal child, you, on the property with no papers or no nothing. So, of course, they don't want the state to take over, oversight because the county, they can get away with everything because they had that Judge Ricky guy that he worked for who was pretty much funneling kids into that ranch and other places and not requiring them to be licensed, number one. And the state was sort of arguing with this judge about that at the time. And it wasn't till that judge lost his seat and someone else took the bench that the state sort of got a handle on it. And I think that's when you had no more kids there. But the story that she tells when she was asked by newspaper articles, how did you get into this? Well, we got another child because my one child that was here, I wanted to have company. So I assumed she was talking about the one child was Charlie, and and then the one she got was you. But what she said was, we saw an ad in the newspaper about a mother that needed someone to watch her child for free because they were having some trouble until they could get back on their feet. So we went to St. Petersburg and we got the child. And we brought the child back, and we kept that child for some length of time. And then the child left. But I actually think that's the story they were giving for you because the dates line up. And the fact is that I was doing some research on the timeline, and your alleged birth date is what, in 61, May of 61?
Right.
Okay.
Yes, May of 61.
The judge told the licensing board that Kay was fostering children before he hired Gilbert, and that's not true because he hired Gilbert in February of 1962, and there's no indication that there were any kids in that house before that but you and Charlie. So they were lying in newspaper articles, probably to cover this situation, and she was telling lies about how they got you. That was your sort of origin story in the newspaper, as far as I can tell. So it's just shocking to me that there was no oversight, that they had a child that they basically stole from his family, and you never, what a tragedy that you never got to know who your parents are. Maybe someone will hear this when the podcast comes out and hear, oh wow, we had a child. They'd be very old now probably if there were siblings and but maybe, I mean, it's a long shot, but just, I cannot imagine. I mean, I can't imagine the boldness. You work for the county. I guess he must have felt bold enough that whatever he did, because the judge was clearly lying for them, making up things that wasn't true to the regulatory board. It's shocking. It is very shocking.
I think when they took me, I think at that point, even she had to, go along with, the cover up, or,
yep.
Or she'd be in trouble or lose me. Her and I got along great. I mean, we were, it was her and I against him, him and Charlie, really, pretty much. And then the whole family, actually, though. The whole family treated her terrible. The brothers, their wives, they just treated her like an outsider and just treated her terrible.
Yeah, I definitely think what she was doing as she was doing these newspaper articles was PR. He was probably, because she was trying to raise money, like she would go to the Friends of the Library to speak on the importance of foster homes and things like that, and she was trying to see if they could get a way to financially run the ranch without state funds, and they were saying that right in the article. And so I think that, number one, she was probably scared if anyone found out you were going to get taken away, and she probably didn't want that. And number two, he was realizing with this whole tug and pull of the state versus the county situation for licensing, because there was county licensing and then there was state licensing, and the state doesn't really play. County was kind of sort of loosey-goosey, but the state was not. So I think he saw the writing on the wall coming, so he had her out there while all this was going on publicly, where there's having the boards are arguing back and forth and about cost and this and that, and he had her out there trying to raise public funds so that they wouldn't have to be under the auspices of the state. And that probably didn't work out. They couldn't raise enough money to have that many kids. I mean, she's talking about being registered for 8 with the county and wanting 20. I mean, that's just ludicrous, There's
no way they could have been taken care of. But it would have been good for him. He would have liked that. I mean, that's just more workers. But, but there's no way she would have, because she would have had to feed them. She would have had, that would have been an incredible burden, because we had a lot of animals. We had cows and horses and goats and chickens and geese and guineas, even had monkeys. We had basically a zoo there, and we even had school buses would come out with kids and come out and see it like a zoo. I even came out one time to my own house from school.
A field trip.
Yeah, that it was a field trip to like a zoo. You have to go out there. 20 kids. I mean, that would.
Were you guys the ones that were taking care of all these animals?
Yeah, my mom and I. Saturday was the only morning that I could get up later every morning I'd go out before the sun come up, go out and take care of all the animals and before school.
Wow.
Yeah, and walk a couple of miles to the bus stop and go to school and come back and do it all over again.
And when they had foster children, the ones that were old enough were also doing the same thing?
Yeah, they were out. They were working too.
And you guys
either work in Orange Groves for the brother, or they would work there on the farm.
They had some of these children working the orange groves?
Yeah. My father's brother had 2 sons, and 2 of those they were adopted too. My father's brother adopted those 2, Timmy and Tommy Rich. They actually still had their names, but they'd never had so they were like foster kids to the brother, which they probably got through him. And they were worked like slaves there too. They were treated really, really bad. They weren't allowed to go anywhere or do anything either.
Did that family have biological children as well?
They had biological children that were older and moved out.
Well, it does seem odd to me that both brothers would have adopted kids, that they'd be I mean, it does literally sound like they were adopting kids to work as labor.
Right.
That's horrific. I can't.
I know. And I was just shocked my whole life back there. I just couldn't believe that nobody was ever going to come out. Nobody ever came out to check on them or ask any questions. I would always expect for years that somebody would come out and inspect or something, or ask questions like, "How are you doing?" Or something. But nobody ever came out.
That's why I said when. I mean, I am interested absolutely in your mom's case because that's part of this, but the foster situation for some reason has tugged me a lot harder, your situation specifically, and hearing all this, because if it was going on there, you can bet, and you're saying his brothers had a couple kids too adopted. I mean, that just seems strange right off the bat. 2 brothers that have adopted kids, like how many families?
They clearly weren't adopted because they went to school and everything with their real names. Their last names were Rich, R-I-C-H, and their names were Hine, so they were never adopted. They were, I don't know, well, I guess foster kids, but they stayed there until they were old enough to leave too.
And the other thing that I noticed when you're in those articles where your mom was trying to get the funding for like 20 kids, what she was wanting to do, she was saying, is rather than they wanted to set up a situation, it almost sounded like a children's home. She sounded like she wanted an orphanage rather than a foster place. She wanted something where the kids were going to stay there for longer, extended period of time, which would absolutely fit in with Gilbert's desire to have ranch hands, workers, rather than kids that left. So it did say in the paper that she had little baby. Do you remember her having babies mostly, or was it, what ages do you remember the kids being, the foster kids?
They were never babies involved. Yeah, they were all around my age, pretty much. They were always around my age when they were there.
Yeah, that's the other thing that was misleading, because she said that they had babies from infants to like 9 years old, I think is what they said is that she had. So you don't ever remember any babies?
No, she was probably saying that to cover her. They were probably saying that to cover themselves on me.
Yes.
Probably.
Yeah.
If anybody asked about a baby, they would say, maybe that's what they were talking about. Because I was the only one, I guess you would say.
I think what was happening is she was going out saying the things that they needed the public to think, probably for it to seem like a real thing. And I'm sure that was Gilbert making that happen, because he, as a juvenile court officer, would know what they would need, what kind of qualifications, what they would need to appear as on the surface. And not only that, I didn't realize, but when I was looking at these articles, one of the things that the licensing board said is the state requirements are such that no one who works with children in their job were allowed to be foster kids. So legally, Gilbert wasn't allowed to be a foster parent. And so his excuse was, the judges was talking for him. The judge was saying, number one, she was fostering before he got the job, which was a lie because you were there. And number two, he's not he's not a foster parent. She's running the place, which technically she probably was doing everything. Anyway, but that doesn't matter because it's both parents in the household would be, the foster parents. So this whole thing is now the talking to you way more to me of a racket than it was anything else. And I just, I it kind of chokes me up. I feel like I need to apologize to you for how you were treated as a kid. I mean, it's just awful. And, I wish there was a chance that someone would hear this story and maybe, recognize the situation in it, maybe recognize the Hines name, recognize something. And that's, the most I can hope for. But
if I wrote a book, people wouldn't believe it.
No.
That's how crazy this whole thing is. Who could believe this mess? I'm amazed that you've done incredible work, that you've gotten this far. I've brought this up to private detectives, lawyers, and they just got a blank look over their face, and they wouldn't do a thing. They were just like, couldn't believe it, or it was just way over their head. They just, it's amazed that you've gotten this far.
I have this feeling that it may have been, now that I've just uncovered this much, more rampant in that area than we even know. If someone's pushing for all these larger foster homes and wanting this and wanting that, either there's a financial motive, or something else. And this sounds like slave labor, financial type motive, because they would also have been getting money from the state or county. I mean, your mom did mention getting checks, but I don't know how big those checks were versus, at one point they were saying $10 per kid. I don't know if it was week or month. It wasn't a huge amount, but for back then, probably enough if you had 20 kids that was a decent amount, This sounds like they were needing people to work these orange groves, and so who's not seeing kids out there working in the orange groves? Who's letting this happen? Do the police know?
We always had the Hispanic kids out there, but I'm not Hispanic, and and my blood type is O negative, which is pretty rare, and it pretty much comes from the Basque area in northern Spain. So I don't know how my parents would be working in an orange grove in Florida or even Texas, I don't know. It's almost like somebody was here on vacation or something and were stolen, because it doesn't make any sense.
You're right.
I'm the only one in the family that had blonde hair and green eyes. Everybody else, I didn't look like anybody else or anybody in any of the families.
Did you put your DNA on Ancestry?
No, I just know I haven't actually done that yet, which I probably should.
Yeah.
But I just know, because he definitely doesn't. Because looking at his past and that, it doesn't fit. And the way he treated me, if I were actually his real biological son, I would have been treated good. And the only reason Charlie was treated good is because he gave him his name. Because, he was no different. He was just another baby. But that's another thing. I don't know where he came up with the money all these years, because he kept buying houses and a lot of houses and a lot of land. And there's something fishy far enough back that just doesn't make any, because I know how far back they go to the rise that
right.
Founded, Erasmus and Mary,
mm-hmm.
the Williams, the daughters, and all that. But I don't know where he came up with. He just seemed to always have a lot of money, and it's.
Well, I was looking through old newspaper articles, when you have to put, like, he was executor of estates of a couple of the family members. So my guess would be that he had his hands in, all the holdings of other family members, perhaps the older ones.
Mm-hmm.
And so
they always ended up with their land somehow. Every time they would die, he would get their land, and then it was.
And he worked for the court system, so he would know how to get documents signed, notarized, put in as legal, maybe even forged with judges' names.
Yeah.
Who knows? It's possible.
He tricked them out of some land that I know of for sure.
Did you ever speak to police? Did they ever interview you?
Yeah, I had a deputy come out, probably in the probably 2002 or 3, came out and asked some questions. He's working the cold case, but nothing ever. I mean, he knew far less than you do.
Oh God.
So it's kind of clear that he really didn't. You know, he was just hoping something would, like I was a witness or something.
Yeah.
You know, if I would have seen it happen, maybe he would have. You know, maybe there was something there that he could do. But yeah, that's why I say you've done amazing work.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Seems to have ever gotten anywhere with it.
Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you about. Cheryl said something about you being forced to dig a hole. Is that a true story?
Oh yeah, that's a whole other thing. Because we didn't have a garbage pickup out there. I was. One of my jobs was to dig out on the side of the property there, holes that were 6 foot by 6 foot and 6 foot deep for our garbage. We'd throw the garbage in there and burn it, and we would just fill it up until the garbage got to the top. Then we'd dig a hole. Then I would dig another hole beside that one and use that dirt to cover in that hole. And we just did that, over and over as we burned our garbage. And we had an active pit at the time that was open. Was she tossed in there and burned? That's what she's probably thinking. Which is very possible. I mean, because there's several pits there that I dug over the years for garbage. And shortly after she went missing, I mean, he went out and killed a bunch of the animals. I guess because he didn't want to take care of them, or maybe that was part of he blamed the animals or something. I don't know, but he killed a bunch of animals, and suddenly all the animals that we were taking care of, just weren't there anymore. Yeah, he probably tossed them into the burn pits, I would think. Probably killed them and just tossed them. And it's like one day you have all these animals, and then the next day you don't have anything.
So I don't understand why he's killing the animals. Because he doesn't want to feed them, maybe?
Or if let's say that she was in one of the pits and burned, if he threw a whole bunch of other animals with their bones, you know what I mean, on top of hers, and somebody were to try to go look, it would complicate things or something. I don't know. But
that makes sense.
I'm pretty sure he had to have tossed them in the pits and that, because they just weren't there one day, and it's not that simple and easy to get rid of animals, that many animals we had.
How far away from the house where you lived, or where, let's say, any kind of assault occurred, were these pits?
Oh yeah, maybe 100 feet away from the house. They were pretty close.
And am I correct that there weren't neighbors close that would be?
No, the only nearest neighbors were his brother and his wife, Clyde and Eileen, at that time. And I don't remember if Ward was still alive. He ran the Orange Grove originally. Timelines, but
was Gilbert physically the type of person that would do? Was he good physically? Like, could he dig a hole? Could he? I'm thinking about body disposal, for lack of.
Back then, he was he's pretty. He's 6 foot. I'd say 6 foot something, and he was a pretty good sized guy in his day. So, even into his 50s, he should be pretty easy to. And she weighed nothing. I mean, she was very thin and small. She was pretty fragile. Yeah, he had her bruised up and bandaged up all the time from, just grabbing her and throwing her around. And she's clearly not leaving the house, because how is nobody in this whole foster system noticing this? Like, her all beat up. How is this not getting noticed? Right. Nobody's, we had old films and movies and pictures and that, and she always had a bandage on her arm, or she was, she was always, always abused. Everybody knew, but I guess nobody important cared or knew. But the family, everybody knew. Because his brother and his wife, they, I wouldn't doubt at all that they were part of it. Because, they didn't like her at all.
What do you remember specifically about her telling you were going to leave?
Well, we were going to go to California. She said she knew. She's always wanted to go there. She had pictures of a lot of the movie stars and that at the time. She kept on her makeup table, and she's always wanted to go. And I guess she just got up the nerve one day, and so she packed the car and that, and we were supposed to take off that morning, and it just never happened.
Her confiding in you is telling of your relationship, because I can't imagine her doing that to a child unless she trusted that, you, number one, wouldn't say anything, and number two, just telling you. Maybe you were the only person in her life that she felt close to like that.
Yeah, maybe her sister, her daughters and that, but, they didn't live there. I was always pretty much hers, and Charlie was his. It's always been that way. He refused to have any, love for me at all, ever. It was all just one way toward him. And,
I guess at this point, it's time that we go back and look at Kay and Gilbert Hine's early years, how they met, and talk a little bit about the Hine Ranch for foster children. In the next episode, you're going to hear from Kay herself. Stay tuned. Original music this season by Lauren Marie and Tom Lively of the Houston-based duo Million Stars Missing.